Eliza Hausman with House, and very excited to welcome Matt here. I know we're going to get into a little bit on your background, Matt, but we, as you can see us here on stage at IBS, we had a really engaging session at IBS, super well attended, lots of questions on this topic of hiring practices in construction specifically. And it went so well, we thought, okay, we better run this again as a webinar so more people can take advantage of it. So super excited to have Matt here, and we're going to kind of dive into it together here online. And please, folks, you can use the Q&A feature to drop in any questions, and I'll make sure that we try to address those during the time we have together today. But other than that, Matt, why don't you share a little bit about your background and why we're talking about this topic?
Well, thank you first for having me. I'm going to miss passing the mic back and forth. Like when we were on stage there, that was the, so I'm going to miss that during this presentation, but so great to be here. Thank you and House for putting this together. My background, like many of you listening, is obviously in construction. My family's been in the industry for, 104 years now. So goes back to my great grandparents. I grew up in the industry, and I saw the struggles of hiring firsthand. Grew the business. I took it over at a young age. And then as I took it over, one of the first challenges was lead gen. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today. How do you get control of your sales? And then the next big challenge we had was hiring. So I ended up fixing that, which we'll talk about what's working there. And then grew a company called the Contractor Consultants that works with contractors across the country doing this. So that's really the foundation of some of the tips we're going to be talking about today is from that business and what's really working right now for remodeling companies across the country.
Excellent. All right, let's jump ahead.
All right. So this is more or less the roadmap that we're going to be covering today. We're going to start a little bit with the precursor of keeping the team busy. So making sure that we have a sales and marketing pipeline that's robust enough that we feel confident we can hire. Now, for most of you, if you're already using House Pro, you already know the benefits of that and the importance, but we're going to dive a little bit more into that. And then assuming we've got that dialed in, now we're going to talk about how can we test and take a data-driven approach to hiring? What are some of the different things that we can kind of split test, and where are those really great results that I can get that not a lot of companies know about? And then we're going to talk a little bit about speed to candidate. So we think about marketing, we think about speed to lead, new client. We're going to be talking about how to leverage that same ideology with hiring, and then some strategic recruitment planning. So what can you do to forecast the team that you need, and how do you make sure that you keep that pipeline full?
Fantastic. All
yeah,
right.
We got a lot of fun stuff to cover today.
A lot we're going to cover. All right. So one of the things that we talked about, Matt, is that, when is the right time to start hiring? How do you know your business is in a place to be able to support hires? As you're thinking through the strategic ways as a business owner to spend your time, maybe talk a little bit about your hierarchy and how you think about that.
Well, I think we grew up in a family business. And so for us, it was really important. And I think like anybody listening here, it's really important to feel confident that when you bring somebody into your company and you find the right person, you want to be able to keep them busy, because we know with the labor shortage, there's no shortage of opportunities out there. And so taking control of your sales, your lead generation is really important. This here is a slide of my company, DiBara Masonry, the construction company, and some of the work that we've done. And so when you have that pipeline full and you're confident you can take people on, then it gets into the hiring part. But really nailing that down first, your online brand, great imagery, leveraging the House Pro platform, those things set the foundation for hiring, which is kind of the next thing once you've taken this.
So you want to get your pipeline healthy before you move on to step 2.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. So I love this because, I think often we don't really have a good view of how others see us, and kind of sort of a self-awareness. And I think that applies not just to ourselves as individuals, but to our companies. as well, right? And the reputation we have, not just with customers, but with potential hires. So maybe talk a little bit about what your experience has been there.
Well, when I first asked this question years ago, it was a painful one. Really thinking through, would I work for my family construction company? So to those of you listening, it's would you work for you? Meaning, if you knew nothing else about your company, right, and all you could do was go online and search the name of the business, and you saw the photos that come up, you see the website that comes up, you see the map location, things like that. Are you excited to apply? Is this a company that you think I'm really, this is awesome. It stands out. It's something that I really would want to join. And so that base level brand, we often think of it from a client or customer perspective, but what does our brand look like from a hiring sense? Like, what is our hiring brand? And then one layer deep to that, or one layer deeper than that, would be thinking through the candidate perspective. So in thinking through, would you work for you? The next question I'd ask is, who are my hiring competitors? Who are the people out there that, let's say I'm hiring a project manager and I type in wherever I live, the city, I type in project manager, job roles near and the city name, right? Who comes up? Who are the people I'm competing with? We often know on the customer side or the branding and marketing side who we compete with, but knowing your hiring competitors and doing this internal audit is so important because you can find out where maybe you're doing really well and maybe some areas where a competitor is offering things you didn't think of, or they have a website or a career video, which we'll talk about later, that is more exciting and compelling, and you can learn from that.
100%. And I think it's always a good exercise to Google your company name and see what comes up first, and make sure that you're really auditing what's happening when people search on your brand. Again, not just for potential clients, but for customers. So I think you've got an example career page here, but a lot of folks, even if you're not hiring a lot of folks, it's a good investment to have a career page, because you even look larger to potential customers when you have a career page, and it allows you to talk about things you might not otherwise. But maybe talk a little bit about, what you see as best practices here.
So this is a dedicated page for your company, highlighting the work that you do, the benefits, and you want to think in terms of 3 to 5 exciting bullet points of why you might work for your company. So if you did the previous exercise, you've already got those now. But this career page is meant for somebody who's in the mindset of, do I want to work for this company? What do I see? Are the images exciting? Do they do work that I'd be excited to do? It's a page meant to capture the lead of the candidate, but it's meant to also warm them up to the idea and excite them to the idea of working for your company.
So what are the key things? I mean, this is pretty image heavy with a form. What do you think, what do you include maybe for your company? And what do you think are the important things to have here? And what are the types of things that you think it's important for a business to communicate? What might be some examples that folks want to see when they're looking for a job?
Yeah, simple things, right? Just a few simple things will get your page off to a great start. One is imagery of the work. If you're thinking about people joining your company and you want passionate people, then you want people that are passionate about what you build or what you do. So showcasing really fun, exciting projects to attract the right talent. The second is 3 to 5 bullet points that are exciting as to why to work there, right? Maybe you offer overtime. Maybe there's no commute greater than an hour, or maybe there's commutes and per diems, right? But what are a few things that you can offer as a company that would a candidate scrolling through this page looks at and says, wow, I definitely am interested in applying to this company. A career video, which we'll talk about later, usually sits on this page. And that's a 30 to 60 second video that highlights the company. But you really want the candidate to get a look and feel as to who you are beyond what you see on the internet.
So I was trying to think about some of the other things that might be appealing, like talking about the training maybe that you offer, or the opportunities for career advancement, or as you said, maybe it's work-life balance, or the opportunity to increase their earnings. But I agree, it's good to kind of go through an exercise and write down what are the things. And, if you do have anybody working for you, you can always go to them and say, hey, what makes it great to work here? Hopefully you're anyone that's working for you currently knows that, or you as a business owner probably should also be clear on, hey, what's our company culture? What's important? Like, hey, we're honest and straightforward communicators. What are the things that are going to matter to somebody when they're joining a company?
Right. And one of the things, so the page itself is really about highlighting work and things that you've already figured out. So if you've done the exercise of would you work for you, you now know what your company looks like online, right? Maybe your Indeed reviews need to be boosted up. Maybe your ZipRecruiter profile is only showing one employee review, and your competitors have 10 or 20 or 50 5-star reviews. So when you've done that exercise, you've got a good feel about the online presence. The next thing is understanding your hiring competitors and looking at what they offer. And if you do that, and in addition, you take the top 2, maybe 3 people in your company that I joke and say, if you could clone somebody in your company, right? 1, 2, or 3 people, and who knows, maybe we're not far away from that in this world, who knows? But, if you could replicate 2 or 3 people, those are the people you want to sit down with and say, hey, you've been here 5 years. You've shown up every day. You're amazing. What do you like about working here? And the reason for that is because you can't always, as business owners or managers or anybody inside the company, we don't always think about it, right? Greatness is just something that we see every day, and it becomes the norm. And so doing that exercise gives you the golden nuggets, and this page is about amplifying some of those key things that you've already figured out.
Fantastic. Well, let's jump and take a look at that video. I know we're not going to watch the whole video.
The goal of this video is you'll notice that there's interviews of people that work at the company. So if I'm a candidate, I want to see who I'm going to be working with. How do they dress? Where do they sit? How do they act? What do they say? And when you think of a marketing video, so let's switch hats for a minute. Let's think we're trying to attract customers. What is it that we want to do? We want to show off the type of work we do. We want to show off our team and our trucks. We want to put our best foot forward. For a career video, we're doing the same thing, but we're enticing candidates. So the best testimonial is people who work at your company now that are saying, hey, I've worked here 20 years. This is the project I got to manage or, have a say in. This was some of the contributions I've made. This is how the company supported me.
Restoring buildings gives you a sense of gratitude. It gives you a sense of self-worth that you can stand back and look at the project you just did and you help regain some of that history that you're experiencing every day.
We want to be known as the best restoration contractor in the industry, not only in Ohio, but across the nation.
Working at Buckeye Construction and Restoration has been a great experience for me. Been in this field for the last 16 years of my life. To come to my hometown and be with a company that's homegrown has been a great experience for me myself.
You get a little bit of the essence there. So what did we see? We saw, current team members right away. It was, work talking about what it's like to work at the company, showcasing a nice office, job sites, team members wearing, proper PPE. So you can tell a little bit about the company and how they operate. And talking about the passion, right? They all really leaned into the passion of how they feel. And so there's a strategy behind in terms of, I think people that feel that same way about the work. And so the goal is to watch that video 30, 60 seconds and think to yourself, wow, there's an emotional connection. I want to be a part of this mission. And that's what that video is showcasing.
Love it. And, how important do you think is the production value? Like, do you need to hire a film crew to do this? What did you do? And, how can smaller companies kind of do something that's appropriate for their size?
That's a great question. I should have brought that up. I think with what we found is in sifting through over 300,000 resumes a month, right, which is kind of our recent stats on the hiring side, is that the most important thing is authenticity. So, for example, if you're a smaller company and you hire a production team and you do all of these things, and then somebody gets behind that video and they start working there, and maybe everything's not perfect. Maybe you're not on these massive projects. Maybe you honed in on one super big job you happen to get, but it's not your emphasis. There's a lack of consistency and congruency there. And so I would say if you're a smaller company and you're quirky and you're growing, or we've been there, right? My family business is a great example of that in the early days. And so leaning into that, you're going to attract the right type of person. And so don't be shy if your trucks aren't perfect, if you don't have the budget for a film crew. I think the more authentic you can make it. We've seen clients where they joke about that. They're like, I didn't hire a film crew because, we want our personalities to be the thing that you're going to, love about working here. And they actually lean into it and you're laughing within the first 5 seconds.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, most people have been on social media long enough now to know, like, hey, just jump in. You can definitely film something yourself with your phone, some simple editing, anything to give folks a tour of the office, anything that can help people feel like you care. And I agree that it's sort of authentic and genuine is appropriate. And, hey, if you have a much larger business, then obviously you want to have something that matches what your competitors are doing, but it can definitely be something that grows with you.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think we talked about most of this, but again, these are just some ideas for the things that you can include in your career video. What it's like on the job site, what it's like in the office, and give folks kind of a good sense of who's the team and what does the office look like and where are they going to be.
Yeah, and I think the tone of the video is important. We've seen more serious, structured videos. We've seen humorous videos. We've seen a blend of the two. I think really brainstorming with your team and saying, who are we? What is our voice? And, if you're a company that does quirky things and has fun and there's certain elements that make you unique, I think really leaning into that in the video you're going to find that you'll access a whole candidate pool that maybe, for example, if they watched the video we just played, might have said, well, this is a little too structured for me, or maybe this is a bigger company than I want. So leaning into your size is really important.
Awesome. All right. I love this. A big piece of what you do, obviously, is trying to build a pipeline of candidates that are interested in the job. So maybe talk us through this case study.
I love this one. And I think before I do, one thing to keep in mind is this is a game of, I was asked very quickly by a contractor. He said, what's the one thing I can do that'll transform my hiring? And I told him, I said, there's no silver bullet, but there's dozens of golden BBs. And it just kind of came out. But I think the important thing to note here is there's no kind of magic potion for one thing that'll work. And I love this case study because it highlights that. And this right here is an example of what we do for clients where we take the time to headline test. And so if you see an example one, our client was running ads with the headline project manager needed for construction work. And we run different headlines. And after a certain period of time, we'll see what we call the qualified applicant, meaning when you get a resume, is it somebody that you feel like on paper is worthy of reaching out to? That's what we consider a qualified applicant. And so the original headline in the same duration, I believe it was 2 weeks, received 14 applications. When we made the headline switch, when we found our winner, which was lead the future of construction, become our next project manager, we got 33 qualified applicants in the same time period, changing nothing other than the headline of the job ad. So that was it. Nothing in the body, no difference in budget or platform, nothing. And you can see where, going back to the original point we talked about, which is the candidate's perspective, if you're a candidate, what sounds more exciting? Project manager needed for construction work, or lead the future of construction, become our next project manager, right? You're attracting the right type of candidate there, somebody who's passionate about the industry. You're getting more opportunities. And same thing with example 2, construction project manager job available. I mean, that's the old, and it's tried and true. It's consistent. But what we found one was transform vision into reality. Project manager wanted, and that was about a 3x in what we call qualified applicants. Again, changing nothing other than the headline. So if you're taking notes, you can steal these headlines or tweak them to what you're doing. But I'd anticipate you'd see a pretty good jump if you just took this one tip and used this.
And I think it's pretty easy. Like if you look on job boards, etc., like you can see what others are putting out there for the same type of job and say, is my headline going to stand out, or does it sound like every other headline out there? And I think it's, in addition to this, it being much more compelling and exciting, it probably, certainly relative to maybe what they see other places, makes the company sound a lot more interesting and the position a lot more interesting compared to what they see elsewhere.
In doing that exercise of going through the candidate journey, right? What typing in the type of work that you want to find as a candidate, and then seeing what job ads pop up and what platforms. You'll notice too, what we find companies that we work with that are really successful. You got big cities, small towns. You have all these different layers. And so when you can layer in, when you scroll through that list, right, and you see how everyone else is representing their companies, if you can really think about, if I live here and I'm this candidate, what is it that I'm craving? What are the things that I'm not getting, right? Is there a ton of big companies and I want to work for a smaller family business? Is it a lot of smaller companies and you happen to be a bigger one? But thinking through the competitive advantage that you might have is really important when you're building out your headlines, because that helps you find the gold.
Great. And I think, like you said, there's maybe some phrases that you touch on from your, video or your landing page that you can pull in, whether it's, join our family business or join our family, or, career advancement opportunities. Again, I think, those are all things that you can test to see what appeals to candidates.
Right.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the key points to test within your headline and maybe within the larger ad itself.
Yeah, so the value proposition, what makes you stand out as an employer? What can you do to help with that? So what is it that you're offering the candidate? One easy way to figure out if you've got this dialed in is, imagine you're at a restaurant and you run into a prospective candidate. And you've got 30 seconds and you're like, we're hiring. They're like, great. Well, tell me about your company. What do you say in that 30 seconds? That gets them, if you're going to hand them a card, right? And say, we call them recruiting cards, but if you hand them a card that has your information and maybe a QR code that pulls up the career video, if you want to get real sophisticated. But what are you going to say in those 30 seconds that they're going to go, wow, I want to work for that company? Right.
So you need a recruiter elevator pitch, right?
Exactly.
Just like you have for your business, right? What are you going to say to them about why they should work there?
Yeah. Dream candidate. You meet them at a restaurant and, you happen to be sitting next to them or they walk by, right? They're perfect. They have the exact number of years that you want, all the skill sets. And, you have to run up to the car and they're like, hey, I'm looking for a job. And they say, tell me about your company. What in those 30 seconds, 3 to 5 bullet points do you say? If you, as a business owner, manager, someone who's part of the team, nail that messaging down, that then becomes the fabric through which you weave your career video, your career page, your job ad. But we find that it's a little counterintuitive, but by actually spending more time figuring this out, it makes everything else so much easier, because everything else is really amplifying those key points, right? You're not changing the essence of your culture or the essence of who you are as a company. You're just slightly, you might go a little longer on a job ad, a little shorter on a career video, things like that, but it's the same key points. So value prop is one, the tone, which you can test right within the job ad or headline, friendlier versus more polished or corporate. And I think one note that is important to highlight is, going back to the authenticity. If you're somebody who, you're like, hey, we're not big corporate, we're a smaller company, really leaning into that. I mean, the data we're seeing on authenticity with companies is just, it's attracting a complete different type of candidate. We've seen, we just placed somebody that was a teacher and they've since retired. They want to get back in the industry. And they were this quirky family tone that this company had is what they were like, well, I wasn't sure if I was going to get back into construction. And they saw that, and that's what grabbed them. So leaning into an authentic tone. And then you've got other ones, specificity, aspirations, and branding, which all kind of fall under that same umbrella.
Yeah, I think the specificity and aspirations, kind of some of the things I mentioned in the last slide of like, yeah, what are the opportunities? Like what are the specifics that are going to appeal to that candidate in addition to kind of the general feel of your company? So when you say testing different hiring assets for branding, is that like different videos, or what are some of the things that you mean by that? What kind of hiring assets are there?
Yep, different images. Some clients will even do different career videos. The first 3 to 5 seconds, the opener of a career video, is usually where people may stay on the video or not. So you can test that. Headlines is on job ads is a big one. That drives a huge amount of success. Within the job ad, the incentives you offer, We had one company, and they offered paid massages to their field crew every month. They got everybody in the field. It was a demolition contractor, actually. And so they're, swinging hammers all day and moving material. And so they did that. And by highlighting and emphasizing that, I mean, it was like, it fell into their imagery. It fell into their, because you have an image of their team, at getting a massage or coming out, and it becomes things that you can amplify. But that's that brand specific, call out that somebody looking for a job goes, I don't know of a demo company that I've looked at that offers this before. This is unique. This is exciting.
Excellent advice. All right. So now we talked about these online channels. What are some of the other channels that you've used for recruiting successfully?
So assuming that you've diversified your approach, which I should have gone a little deeper in, but you've got your Indeed, your ZipRecruiter. So diversifying platforms and job boards digitally, there's LinkedIn, there's so many different tools to give you an opportunity to get in front of candidates. Assuming you've done a good job of maximizing those, the next thing is what we call the one-to-many approach. So now it's saying, how do I talk to one person and get in front of even 10 or 100 potential candidates? And so, project managers and estimators, if that's what you're looking for, or salespeople, colleges are great. They have alumni lists. There's nothing a college likes better than a high placement statistic, right? We place X amount of people, into jobs within the first 6 months. So if you could contribute to that statistic, believe it or not, they want to help. So trade schools, universities, job fairs, trade associations are all great. Anywhere that you can talk to one person and get in front of lots of different candidates. We've seen it with, there's so many creative, exciting ways to do this. Your current employees are a great thing too. Taking your current team and incentivizing them to go out and talk to their friends, family, cousins, anybody that they interact with in the outside world. If you have your whole team motivated to do that, all of these small things done well yield to a great candidate pipeline.
Awesome. Any comments on what kind of a presence to have at a job fair? Do they give you a table? What do you need to have in terms of branding? Any advice if people are starting off with some of these in-person opportunities?
I love that. So job fairs, they vary. Some people, I would say if it's your first job fair, I would probably just go and network. I would study what others are doing. Going back to that example of, the candidate's perspective, I would walk my first job fair as a candidate. I would say, okay, I'm either looking for a new career, or maybe it's a job fair at a school, college, and you're saying to yourself, I'm a student, I'm looking for a job. What are people putting on signs? One thing that I think is underrated is what's beautiful about hiring is it's universal. So if you go to a job fair and there's tech companies and there's all sorts of different industries vying for this next generation of talent, you can borrow ideas ethically from any one of them. So, I'd walk the first one, and then I would transition into a small table. And again, the key word is authentic, right? If you have this big table and, all this fanfare and it's not, you've got one truck and you're growing your company, they may feel a little bit of a disconnect. So leaning into that is totally fine.
Great advice. All right. So you've got some folks coming in. How do you get the right folks hired?
This has saved so many hours for so many people. So one of the biggest troubles in our industry and construction as a whole, but specifically remodeling is a big one with this, is you have a candidate and maybe they have a resume, maybe they don't. Maybe they've worked at a company for 13 years and they're not a career job hopper. And so they're not great at the interview. Maybe they're awkward on the phone. That may not deter from what they can do in the field. So there's this very difficult thing between somebody who's maybe good at acquiring a job and good at executing the job and the skill set. And they're not always the same. Some people can look great on paper, but not have the skill set. And so what this talks about, the goal here is to find a way to objectively measure the skills of the candidate. So, and there's so many ways to do this. For estimators or salespeople, it could be sending them a set of plans. And usually these are small, it's small amounts, but paid assessments, or you could have what's called an initial qualifier, which takes them less than 30 minutes or an hour to complete. And most candidates will do that for free. But if you want an in-depth one that takes 4 or 8 hours, usually there's some compensation. But the goal would be, if it's a project manager, maybe it's a set of plans and say, hey, mock up a schedule. How would you approach this job and how long do you think it would take? Talk me through, build out a schedule and show me where the subs would go, or if we self-perform, where would our crew slot into this? If it's a office manager or bookkeeper, having a books assessment where it's going through some financials and identifying things that maybe don't look right. Or field can be coming to your yard or shop or even a job site at the end of the day and getting hands-on with building something. And what this does is two things. One is the obvious. You get to evaluate the skill set. The other thing it does, though, kind of secondary effect that we didn't plan for, is it allows you to move good candidates through the process so quickly. See, when we hire, sometimes we interview somebody and then we go, okay, they seem pretty good, but I'll have, Mike or Michaela interview them now just to make sure, right? And then it goes a day or two and they interview, and then it's like, oh, all right, I'll have them come in the office now because I think we're good, but let's do one more interview just to be sure. In this labor market, you can lose a candidate doing that. So this allows you to take somebody who you think, wow, this could be the one, on the first interview and immediately judge their skill set. So you can hire somebody way faster.
Fantastic. So talk a little bit about the personality assessment. Where does that fit in?
So this is a little bit more for roles that are more team focused, roles that are more client facing. Personality is a big one in construction, and there's a bunch of different ways to do this. There isn't one assessment that we believe is tried and true, but I think it's important to understand their ability to, I could give a few examples, right? We had somebody that we were thinking of promoting in my construction company years ago, and they were a foreman, and we wanted to bring them up to project manager, managed lots of projects. And we did this assessment, and it showed us that they were really good at single focus things that they were in front of, but that they may struggle to do lots of different things that they're not necessarily in front of. And so it highlighted some strengths and weaknesses. And it was so beautiful because we tested their ability to do that role and very quickly found out it wasn't a good fit, but we kind of had some data to show that might be the case. So we had a whole different growth plan based on the assessment of their strengths and weaknesses. So personality is how they get along with the team members and how they're going to fit culturally. But then I think hard skills and soft skills are important too, because you can understand where you might have somebody in the field that is just a stone's throw away from promotion and management experience. And those assessments help you see that.
Fantastic. Great advice. All right, let's talk a little bit about this honest employee audit. What is that, and what are you looking for here?
So we noticed a lot. Culture is one of those hard things to pin down, but we realized that if a company doesn't have a good culture, it's kind of like trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in it. Because every time you bring somebody good in, you're gonna lose somebody due to the culture. And so when we started dissecting really what culture was in its simplest form, we found that a lot of these things fell under the umbrella of clear communication. I had a mentor early on, and he said, nothing changes until the unsaid is spoken. And so that's the foundation for what this is, right? And so the way we put this into work is usually some companies will do it every quarter, some will do it every 4 months or 6 months, but it's a 1 through 10 scale questionnaire that goes to different departments within the company. So it might be your field team. You might have one for managers. You might have one for executives if you're at that level. And what they do is they simply click 1 through 10. on some strategic questions that talk about some of the items here, which is compensation, or how they feel in terms of their workload and managing their workload, or, do they have a support system? And the nice part about it is it's completely anonymous, and you'll get averages, and you can see patterns and trends in your company. And what this does is two big things. It allows the team members who are filling this out to feel heard, right? Now their voices and opinions matter. But the other thing it does is, how many times have we heard from a project manager or a foreman, hey, everything's good, team's good, everyone's happy. And then a week or two later, something happens. Somebody gets upset, they leave the job site, or maybe somebody comes in the office and they're just not happy with things. And so this removes that middle layer of communication, and it just puts it into black and white data.
That's great. And, even for smaller teams, it's something that they can take and do even in one-on-ones, in a regular conversation, to make sure that you're actually regularly asking these questions to kind of take the temperature of what's going on, within your team, no matter what the size.
And we tested, this was really interesting, early data. We tested the one-on-ones. So we had a client, and they did one-on-ones in all areas. And basically, based on that feedback, they came back and said, all right, this is how we feel in these key areas. We need to work on this. We need to work on this. Mm-hmm. When we implemented this, we overlaid the two. And we found that this assessment brought a deeper level of truth, because there wasn't the intimidation of one-on-one. And a lot of times your direct report maybe is the person that you feel is not hearing your concerns, and it's not always intentional, but so it's nice. What we found is both, right? We do a ton with one-on-ones, and those are huge and really important to feel, heard and have their space. But for example, in particular, pay, we found that pay with a one-on-one in construction, if you're not taught how to talk about your salary and talk about your pay, sometimes you feel weird. But if I ask you a question on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your pay? How fair do you feel it is, right? 1 through 10. If you feel 1, you'll click 1. And so it allows you to overlay the two data points, and they're both extremely important.
Great. That's a really interesting point. And here's a good example. I think of that 1 to 10 scale. Do you want to talk through this example?
Yeah. I mean, it's this one says, on a scale from 1 to 10, how do you feel? How much do you feel like you are a part of a team? 1, no sense of team. 10, extremely team oriented. And so that's kind of the general essence of what this is meant to do, is to get a feeling. And you may find, you'll find patterns and trends, and then you'll find outliers. You'll find that there's 1 or 2 maybe people who just, it's like, something, because we can see it at an individual level, and then you can aggregate the data. So you might find one person that's clearly not happy, right? It's just like, we don't know who this is, but we know there's somebody who's just not happy. And so it allows you to really start honing in to, where can I improve as the employer? And also, to go back to the beginning, is to take the areas that you're doing really well at and say, all right, why isn't this on? If I have a 90% average, right? People feeling like a team, what is the bullet point on the career page that talks about team? Right? Like, what does that look like? Because clearly this is an area we're winning. So this isn't meant to be all bad. This is meant to also show the areas that you're doing amazing. And then you ask yourself, okay, do I have a bullet point on my career page that highlights this particular area? Because clearly we're good at it, right? And so that's an exciting part of it.
Great. And I think a couple other points on this, one, obviously we're talking about this because once you hire, it's obviously much cheaper to retain an employee than to have to go and hire again. And so these pieces really help, hopefully help you retain those employees that you want to retain. And I agree, it kind of gives you feedback that you can then use maybe during your recruiting process. Maybe it's helpful to tell candidates that you have a feedback process, like a formal feedback process that you used, right, to try to keep the team happy and for them to provide, feedback in a safe forum.
I mean, if you really, when you to touch on that, if you really work on this, I mean, we've seen clients who have actually used this in the interview process and shown, hey, we have 27 team members. Here's how we score anonymously, and show it, and actually show, like, this is our team. This is how they feel. So our hope is that if you join this team, you'll be contributing to these positive insights. But this is because it becomes like the employer's report card in a way, right? One area of the report card. So yeah, we've seen it be a very big tool for sure.
Love that idea. Okay. So Matt, I know you use House Pro software, and I asked you to include this and talk a little bit about how you're using, estimates and takeoffs, but more because what I'm hearing more and more for pros when they're hiring is they're looking for folks with some reasonable technology skills, like even field crew, like they want more and more they're using technology with their teams, with their clients. Clients are sort of expecting this, right? The next generation of homeowner clients is pretty darn tech savvy, right? Even if the boomers aren't necessarily. And so they're looking to kind of start to move their teams, in a direction that is, where they're going to be comfortable embracing tech tools. So I just thought it'd be interesting to share a little bit about how you view that and kind of how you use tech and what your team expectations are.
Well, before we jumped on here, I was trying to think of one word to describe it. I was like, well, easy. I'm like, simple. I mean, there were so many good words to describe House Pro because, I mean, as somebody who started with whiteboards and notepads and then evolved into, we evolved into Excel sheets. I mean, I remember I had my highlighter kit for all my plans. So the generation, where we're at right now with things is really exciting. I think what I love about House Pro is just how integrated everything is. I love the fact that we're able to take something from, I know it's probably not the main focus anymore, but we still use it on the lead gen side, the brand side. I mean, it helps a lot. There, we even use it for photo inspiration. I love the fact that I don't have to go on Google. If our sales team is in front of a client, I can keep it on the platform and not end up with like, oh, I like this one and that one. And you end up on this, next thing you got 17 tabs and there goes the sale. So I love that. But I like the back end a lot of how easy it is to do everything, and how, for example, we do a takeoff like we have here, how that takeoff then integrates into a materials list, right? Where you can do your job costing for that project, your pricing and proposal. And then you can carry that right into an estimate or a proposal for a client, or even a contract when you get to that point. But I think that's really what I find the most exciting is clearly it's somebody who thought through it and said, I want to make something easy, simple, and integrated across the journey for a remodeling or construction company.
Yeah. And, another thing that I've been hearing and seeing lately is people will actually include the technology in their job postings. Like, hey, if you're familiar with House Pro, or right, you use project management software, or right, like obviously depending on the role, but having those skills, has become a selling point, or the opportunity to get those skills. Like, hey, we work with tech. So like you talked about communication being important. We make it easy for you to communicate, and right, we put the tools in your hands, and right, you can do everything from your phone, and that's become a recruiting tool, right? That they're not kind of going to be working necessarily in the dark ages, but that they're going to be working for kind of a tech forward firm can be a helpful recruiting tool as well, especially for younger candidates.
Oh, I did a talk for high school students, and I was talking about the importance. I think their insecurity is they don't have that 10, 15 years of field experience. These are vocational high school students. So they're like, look, I love the trades, right? I love the industry. I've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, but there's this apprehension around, I don't have 10 years of experience. And I literally said to them, I said, look, you have no idea the advantages you have in the tech side with software and social media and technology. I'm like, keep learning the hands-on side of it in whatever area you want to learn, but that is such a valuable skill. And so it works both ways, right? Candidates become more valuable and, definitely more noticeable. Seeing a resume that has that experience is exciting. And then on the employer side, if you're willing to invest in that training, I know that candidates really, especially now, and I think it's worth highlighting this, we're at a point where I think the scales are starting to tip, and we're getting interest from other industries. We're getting people who maybe don't want to work in an office. They've had a traditional job, and they say, the stats are definitely starting to shift to where people are coming from other industries into construction. There's so much talk around how much money you can make, how fast you can grow. And so I think showing those newer candidates that you invest in their training and making it okay to not have all these skills up front, it gives you a huge leg up. I think it's a going back to what can you highlight? That's a big one.
I love it. Love that. I think this is just another example, again, of an estimate kind of being able to do things online. But I agree, like, more and more, same thing. We're hearing that, it only takes a couple people who on your team who are comfortable to help, right, bring the other folks who might be older or less comfortable on board. And so kind of having that mix of folks on your team that are excited about technology, and part of the way that your kind of firm is moving forward, in the 21st century as well.
And that example, funny story on this example. So when I put this together, this was a friend of mine who's building a cabin, and he wanted to double check the living square footage. And so I pulled out House Pro, click, boom. I told within 2 minutes, I remember he called me up. He's like, "Hey, I'm having trouble with a contractor." And so the example is funny, just the simplicity. I was like, "No problem. I'll have this, go and hold." And I clicked, maybe 6 buttons. And I was like, "All right, this is the actual living square footage." I'm like, check that with the architect, and we could go from there. So it's just a funny, real life example.
Yep, definitely, right. You want the costs and all these things to be accurate, right, for your bids and everything else. So it's a huge way to improve accuracy and like you said, kind of communication across the board. Well, I think that's most of what we want to cover. I know if folks in our audience have any questions, please drop it into the chat or Q&A, and we'll ask Matt. I know we have a few questions that have come in. Let's see, Matt. So, Matt, can you talk a little bit more about the job boards that you use, and kind of how are they different, and how many do you need to be on? Talk a little bit about that.
So, when we do hiring, there might be 20, 30, 50 job boards that we put candidates on. Some of the job boards actually post to other job boards, so they're kind of a central point, and then they'll blast it across other ones. I think highlighting the difference. So you've got LinkedIn, you have ZipRecruiter, Indeed, and then some people, believe it or not, some of our clients have even used for like the real hands-on skill, Craigslist, which has to be used in a certain way. But let's focus on the main few right now. So Indeed's great. That's where you tend to get a lot of volume. The headline testing, keyword testing is awesome. ZipRecruiter's another good one. The difference we find is Indeed, you tend to get a lot more candidates. ZipRecruiter, you might get a little bit less, but it seems to find different candidates. They find somebody. We had a client who'd been hiring this role for many years, and when we activated ZipRecruiter, he just had access to people that he never got on any other platforms. LinkedIn's great. Especially some of the organic features, being able to reach out to people and just let them know that you're hiring. So LinkedIn's really, really good for that, especially project managers, estimators, sales team. There's a lot of people who already have a skill set that you might be looking for on LinkedIn. And then there's the organic social media side of things too. So your Facebook, your Instagram. So I think it's a question of who are you looking for? And if it's a little bit more hands-on in the field, you might find an Indeed or ZipRecruiter or some of those trade-based job boards. And then if it's more managerial, I would definitely be looking at a LinkedIn and leveraging that.
Super. And I think we have time for one more question, which was a little bit about, how much time should somebody expect to spend, to hire a candidate, and, who on the team is doing this kind of work. If they're a smaller company, if they're a larger company, they can hire somebody like you and outsource this process. If they're doing it in-house, who's usually involved, and how much time does it take?
Yeah, we built a whole company around this because this is the struggle. In a smaller company, usually you have hiring being touched by multiple people, and that's tricky because at the end of the day, it's hard in a month, let's say, or 8 weeks, right? If you don't make a hire, who do you sit down with to tweak the process? It's like, well, I did the job postings, and it's like, well, somebody else did the screening, and then I did the interviews, right? There's usually no sole ownership, but you could expect to spend, I mean, depending on the role and the candidate, it could be 2-3 hours a day. If you really want to do it well, it's more than that. But I think it's really more about what is it costing you not to hire, and what would the right person do for your company, and working backwards from that. And then, because a lot of companies say, I don't have the time, and it's unfortunately one of those things where we find when we really go through the list of things that they're doing, that it is a priority. And then they either outsource it to a company like us or someone else. But it's one of those things where if it's done right, the time it takes to find the candidate is less, but it's a process, right? If you're not getting the candidates, like we do it within the first 8 to 10 minutes, candidate resume screen, and we're already reaching out. If you're doing it at night, like in the old days I used to do, I'd go and check my inbox, and I've got 27 resumes, and I'd email some, and then next day they'd call me back during their lunch break, but I'm doing appointments. Like it becomes really difficult. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat that part of it. And then time has to be allocated to do this well.
Great. Well, Matt, I can't thank you enough for spending the time after we did this at IBS, but I know it was incredibly valuable for the folks here. We're recording this and are going to send it out to anyone that wasn't able to join us today, but really appreciate your wisdom and advice, very hands-on, actionable things for folks to take away here. So thank you for joining us, and thanks everybody who joined us live today.
Thank you. Thank you, Liza, for having me.